video, please. Welcome everyone. This is Track 1, Environment, Science, and Governance, Better Data Insights Enabling Companies' ESG Goals, and ultimately the benefit of society. I would like to go ahead and welcome our presenters today. We have with us Anthony Deighton, who is the Chief Product Officer with Tamr. Anthony oversees product solution strategy for Tamr's growing data mastering solutions. Anthony was most recently CMO at Celonis and Senior Vice President of Products at Click, and has over 20 years of experience building and scaling enterprise software companies. Anthony helped found the employee relationship management ERM business at Siebel Systems and grew it to over 300 customers and $20 million a year in license revenue. He holds a bachelor's degree from Northwestern University and an MBA with high distinction from Harvard Business School. We also have Harveer Singh, correct? And he is the Chief Data Architect and Global Head of Engineering and Architecture at Western Union. Harveer has served as Chief Data Architect and Global Head of Engineering at Western Union since July of 2020. He manages the data pipelines, big data environments, cloud data platform, data marketplace, MarTech, and ad tech platforms, digital banking integrations with Western Union, loyalty and consumer ecosystem, digital assets, etc. Harveer is a technology executive with experiences spanning several industries such as financial services, including banking, payments, insurance, capital markets, and asset management, retail and professional services. Previously, he has been working in E&Y's financial services group, where he currently co-leads E&Y's next generation architecture and solutions for financial services. Prior to E&Y, he led various consulting roles at Deloitte, IBM, and Accenture. And with that, I want to go ahead and welcome both presenters to the platform to get us started today.
All right, thank you. So, all right, the mic is working, excellent. So thank you, everybody. And so my hope is that this session is somewhat interactive, and so I think we have the microphones. We'll make sure to leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. And the other thing that I think will be nice about this is that this session should be quite practical. So Harveer and I have known each other for some time, and the work that Western Union is doing in thinking about both moving to the cloud, taking advantage of cloud resources, and thinking about how to get a handle on customer data, in particular thinking about how to get a handle on customer data for the purpose of improving the relationship that you have with your customers and sort of really supercharging that relationship is at some level a really practical example of the challenges we face from a data perspective. And so my job here is to guide the conversation and hopefully send us in a good direction. So maybe we could start, Harveer, if you've been with Western Union for 2 years now, and maybe you could just walk through some of the kind of key initiatives that you've been driving and how that fits into Western Union's broader strategy and broader business goals.
Sure. Thank you, Anthony. And welcome. If you guys want to move front, that's okay. I won't bite. I was brought into Western Union in 2020 in July to accelerate the cloud adoption, if you will, because one of the things, if I look at a company like Western Union, it's a 171-year-old company, which has obviously reinvented itself over and over again, survived all the crashes that have happened, the dot-com boom, et cetera, now the crypto crash and whatever, right? So it's kind of survived all of that stuff there is a lot of substance in the company. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of culture. But with a lot of that also has a lot of baggage, which is, there's a certain set of way that they are used to doing it. So one of the things that the leadership wanted to change was try to break the norm. So one of the things that they did was, obviously invited me to the table and say, come and break the norm, come and take this organization into the next gen, try to make sure that we are not an infrastructure management company. We're not trying to manage infrastructure, and not piling on system admins, and we're actually building products for our customers, whether it's a data product, whether it's a financial service product. And for us, everything is data because, if you look at what we do as an organization, we are in the business of moving data. So when I want to send money to someone in this room, I'm not going and physically handing them the cash. I am moving it on a wire, which essentially moves the data. So for us, data is the backbone of our entire organization, and we operate in about 200 countries. So having that right data foundation to make sure our digital growth is accelerated is what I was tasked to do last 2 years. Super proud that we were able to migrate our entire big data platform, our entire analytical platform off the on-prem environment into the cloud. Within 9 months, we were able to get rid of 3 warehouses, put everything on Snowflake. We were able to look at our mastering technology, which was obviously siloed because there was a retail branch and then there was a digital mastering that was happening because of the data that they were collecting. And we said that we could not survive with a single, we could not survive with the traditional way of mastering data. We started to look at how we have to look at a little bit more AI-based mastering, how we have to look at more intelligent-based mastering so that, we as an organization can come together, whether it's one channel or another, we can be an omni-channel organization and serve our customers better. So that's kind of my journey for the last 2 years. Because of the work that I did, I ended up getting a little bit more than what I think I bargained for. I do manage our loyalty platform and I do manage our ad tech and martech platform, but it makes sense because all of that is basically connecting data from all the way when a customer is even thinking about sending money to all the way sending the money and then maybe the follow-up and any kind of services post the transaction that we have to do. So it helps us to bring all of that together all the way from start to the end.
So it's fair to say Western Union is the classic example of a company that's been around for over 100 years that is steeped in the physical real world that's becoming a digital-first organization and undergoing that digital transformation. From your perspective, before we talk about, in a sense, the data, let's talk about cloud. Because the way I hear you telling the story, cloud is the first step on that journey. Maybe talk a little bit about the drivers for moving to the cloud and also some of the challenges behind maybe getting the organization to think that way.
Yeah, so if you think about an organization like us, we are operating in 200 countries. So, and we have to abide by localization laws for those countries as well. So how many infrastructures and how many data centers that I have, you can obviously imagine, right? And every time I have to launch a new product or every time I have to scale, I have to figure out where's the right place to do capacity. And that takes away a lot of our time. This is where we were spending a lot of time. When we decided that when we were analyzing when we wanted to move to the cloud, one of the important factors that came into the play was there's a hardware refresh strategy that happens every few years. We know that X amount of hardware that needs to be bought. Our leadership just said no. We're not going to buy more hardware. We're not going to be in the business of keep buying hardware. We want to be able to make sure that we can build products. Let's figure out what the next 10 years our customers are needing, because there's a lot of challenges to the traditional money movement that we are facing as well. There are a lot of smaller organizations which are not public, they're private. They have more investor money that they can throw at marketing and they can do things cheaper. We're a public listed company, so we have to abide by our commitment to the street, so we cannot sometimes lower our rates or lower our margins, so we have to abide by. But then we're facing stiff competitions from these, which are digital first organizations. We were a retail first organization because if you go around the block, you'll probably see 4 Western Unions around, but you don't see a Remitly, you don't see a MoneyGram or any other of our competition. So that was one. The other aspect is with the blockchain coming into play, companies like Ripple and companies like there's a couple of more which are actually challenging the norm in terms of the movement of money. They're presenting themselves as a financial backbone that can potentially take out banks. Whether it's true or not, but there is an imminent threat at some point. If we don't react and we don't, build stuff which can take us for the next 10 years, then we will melt. Think about two icebergs which are melting. One is retail, one is digital. One is melting faster than the other. But what are we doing to, we have to do our climate control to make sure we don't melt. So we started to look into going into business in other areas. So for example, we launched a bank in Europe. We built it in 9 months, which is amazing because I'd never heard of building a bank in 9 months. 1 year ago, when somebody said, let's build a bank, it's a 3 to 4 year effort and takes hundreds of millions of dollars. We built a bank in 9 months, and primarily that was one of the reasons because we were on the cloud. My entire bank is modular. I brought in best of breed of softwares together, put up a banking engine in Europe, put up a warehouse, which is our Snowflake environment in many regions. I have a backbone sitting on MuleSoft, and I have an OutSystems installation which does my low-code platform. In 9 months, I have a running application. I have more than 15,000 customers going in, which is what the cloud enabled me to do. If I was to go the traditional route, you multiply that by at least 3 to 4 times. It will take 3 to 4 years to do that. So that was the biggest driver for us to get into the cloud is we don't want to just manage infrastructure. We want to build products. And the product innovation and product development will only come with this. Yes, sir.
We can hear you just great.
Well, I don't know about online.
Yeah, no, you need to go to the mic.
Online. I remember that.
Somebody.
Yeah, virtual.
Are we live? That's interesting.
Specifically on the cloud and how that enabled your transformation. When you were in 200 plus countries, did you end up going to a smaller subset, if you will, of cloud footprint as far as you were able to regionalize and still meet all of your regulatory requirements? And talk a little bit about that. If you went from 10 to 1 or what the ratio was.
Yeah, so being a US-based company, we had a little bit of advantage because the aggregation of data was happening here in our warehouses here. So we started with obviously the biggest chunk that was taking the majority of our time, which was our big data environment. So we took that and we moved to the cloud. That was the first one to do. Then we went to the countries where the regulations are the most difficult ones to deal with. We never went to Russia, for example, because Russia always had a local installation. We always left it alone because the AWS doesn't work there. For us to find a partner, they had a program called Outpost, but they were always also not sure if Outpost would work there. It was like the biggest hassle to go there, so we left it alone. And this year, in April, we just shut it off, and as soon as the war started, our entire operations in Russia shut off. So it was very easy for me to isolate it and say, no more, just shut the entire thing off. But the idea was we obviously, started with the US, and then Europe, and then the rest of the world. That's how our strategy was. Because other financial institutions have done it before us, we are not I wouldn't say we are the first one, but we were able to learn and we were able to do it much faster because we knew what the problem was. The other thing that we did was whether it's a good approach or a wrong approach, our goal was to get out of our on-prem environment in 1 year. That was a very aggressive goal. If I started to re-architect everything, I would be still sitting here 2 years ago and trying to figure out the code. So our goal was, how can we lift and shift majority of the stuff? For some people, it might not be the right approach, but this was the right approach for me because the amount of money that I saved in not renewing the hardware, I can now re-architect it what I want. I can actually get rid of stuff that I want. I can argue either way, which is the right approach or not, but this worked for us because that was the right nature in which our metrics were being measured. Now, I give you an analogy, and this is where somebody asked me a question at the Snowflake Summit, is like, how can we follow your journey? How can you follow your path or journey? Think about it this way. You have a river, and you have to cross the river. Now, I'm crossing it from this particular place. Even if you are 2 steps down, the depth could be different, the current could be different, the infestation of animals could be different, and it could be either longer, it could be low, much faster. Either way, you can get inspired, but it's your journey to take at the circumstances that you have. These were my circumstances, what I presented. So if you want to learn from those circumstances, feel free, but try to make sure that you adjust as you go along. You need to check and adjust as you go along.
So what I hear you saying is that in becoming a digital organization, you're leveraging the cloud to increase speed. And I've often said this, like today, anyone in this room with 15 minutes and a credit card could have 50 machines on the cloud processing data for you. To try to do that 5 years ago would be a 6-month, 12-month, if you're lucky, project of procuring hardware, finding a data center, wiring them together, like it's a disaster. So you're really taking advantage of this cloud infrastructure. But the other strange thing that you did is that you linked the challenge of moving to the cloud to the challenge of getting a handle on your customer data and thinking about master data as a kind of primary challenge. So rather than like, well, we'll move to the cloud and worry about the data later, it was like, no, we're gonna move to the cloud and think about getting a handle on the data in one. And that's something that's pretty unique.
So the interesting thing is it was still a very hybrid approach. While we did not disrupt our business processes, so our customer database that currently has or had a software that was running, I'm not going to name all the vendors that we have, but we had a legacy platform that was running for more than 10 years. It did its job when it needed to do its job, right? But now it's a time that we needed to look beyond what it could do because it was purely doing either deterministic or probabilistic matching. It works, I would say 80, 90% of the time it works, but the real difference is that 10% is where you can either reduce your fraud or you can increase your revenue because our customer base is interesting. We have close to 200 million active customers over 2 years, and that has remained constant. It's about how much money can we make from those customers and how much fraud and risk that we can reduce because our product has been the same. So one of the things that we did was we did not change the business processes, but we introduced, for example, Tamr as the next-gen matching engine, trying to make sure that we can now start to look at our customer database, our customers across those two channels, and see how they match together. We obviously saw a dip in terms of, Tamr is able to match more because it's more artificially driven. It's looking at data points that traditional tools were not looking into. We have been carrying that over for the last, I would say, 3 months, 4 months in parallel, and it'll continue for another year. We're not going to get rid of the other technology until our business processes are ready to change. Now, we have been refreshing our front-end applications, our mobile app, as well as the digital bank. For example, our digital bank is fully reliant on Tamr. We didn't even carry the old platform with it, which is fully reliant because it was built from scratch. But our older app, which is the westernunion.com app on the web as well as on the mobile phone, it's still using the other product, but we are starting to carry we call the Tamr ID along with it so that in the next refresh, we can slowly and start to get rid of it. So yes, we did that, but we are still carrying those two in parallel, at least for 12 months before we can actually shut one or the other off. The other reasons for that is that we have actually been engaged with a lot of our external partners. So for advertising, for data sharing, et cetera. If I switch off something immediately, all my linkages will break. So it will take at least for 12 months for us to kind of start breaking those linkages and start to say, okay, from today onwards, you'll be starting to use this ID instead of the other ID. So it's still a very aggressive approach, but it's the right approach. Unless you run it in parallel, you're not going to achieve anything.
So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a probabilistic view of linking data versus a deterministic. But before we do that, the general idea here is that of identity and identity resolution. And I know you have some strong opinions about what identity means, especially when you think about identity across channels, like identity in real life versus metaverse.
Sure. So in the last few months, I've started to kind of do a little bit of research around so it used to be physical identity back in the days when you carry your passport or driving license. Then these became a little bit more intelligent. Now you can scan and you can tap and et cetera. So they kind of leave a little digital footprint, but they're not fully digital yet. If they were fully digital, you didn't have to carry them, right? Everything would have been on the phone. I like Colorado, the state of Colorado, because you can actually have a driving license on a phone, and it's accepted. If you get pulled up, you just show them your Colorado driving license on your phone, and you're great. It's the state is in the forefront of doing technology work. I'm super impressed with them, but not everyone is doing that. So you're still like in a hybrid mode between your digital and your physical identity. The digital identity is also the work that you do on the other websites. So you're browsing the internet, you're buying stuff, you're using a credit card, you're buying a mortgage. You're doing a lot of these activities, right? So now you're connecting your physical identity to a digital identity. So at this point of time, majority of the organization, when you talk about identity, they stop there. The next stage of evolution is called assumed identity. At least this is the word that I've come up with, assumed identity. In the metaverse, which is what the new hype word is, I can be Anthony. Nobody's stopping me from being Anthony. And I can trick the system to be Anthony. I can force the system to be Anthony. But how do you really understand if I'm Anthony or not is using behavior. So the next evolution of master data will come with behaviors. How do you tie the behavioral traits of a person, of what he does, where he goes, where is he logging in, how is he logging in, how does he approach things? I bet everyone has the behavioral signature which is unique to them. No two people are alike. So that concept in itself is very interesting, and we started to look at that because for us as a business, we may be serving customers in the metaverse in the future. So we want to be able to make sure that we can rely on them, on our technology, which is the assumed identity, to be able to match it into the physical and the digital world as well. So now you have 3 dimensions of identity. By the way, I'm actually writing a book around it. So I wrote an article which I turned into a book, and apparently it got the top 10 reads on Amazon, and I got a email saying that your book is doing really well. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to write another one. This is the topic that I'm writing. So will be interesting to see how it's formulating. But this is the first time I'm sharing this idea, which I think is very, very interesting on how the world is going, because our kids are going to be affected. Everyone in this room will be affected in some way or some form with the assumed identity. It's hard enough to catch fraud today. It will be almost impossible to catch fraud in the future if we don't adapt now. And given with the Western Union, we are in the business of catching money launderers, human traffickers, everything because of the data that we have.
So I think it's a really important idea. So you're thinking about identity beyond the sort of traditional physical means and extending that into the virtual and accepting the fact that people are going to have perhaps different identities, but you're using what you're doing is adding a lot of data to that so that you can start to tease apart or disambiguate those different identities. But at its core, one of the strategies that the Western Union's taken and that you've been spearheading is this idea of using a probabilistic machine learning-based approach and not a deterministic rules-based, I'm going to write a bunch of code to sort of disambiguate these things. Maybe you could share how those two ideas kind of come together. And also, in a sense, I would imagine that as an audience, the idea of using machine learning to resolve customer identities might, on the face of it, seem scary. Like I'm turning this over to the machine, much like turning your self-driving car on feels a little scary, right? Turning it over to the machine, yep. Similarly. But you've gone through that journey.
Yeah, so your traditional mechanism is, if I have my first name Harveer and my last name saying date of birth, et cetera, right? We have if I was a banking institution and I was to open an account, I have to give them at least a laundry list of items which somebody validates, et cetera. The business that we are in, the KYC laws in countries are different. Sometimes even in states are different. And then there are laws determining how much money you're sending, also determines how much information you're collecting. And on top of it, you also have to understand we have a huge partner network where, as a partner, they want to make and churn as many customers, or they want to turn around as many customers as possible in the store. than trying to focus on data quality. And that was primarily one of the reasons is, right now, yes, I do care about data quality, and I'm trying to put as much rules in the front end as possible. But if it prohibits them from doing their business, they'll turn around to the next terminal, which is another competitor, and just send the money through there. So it's a fine balance that I have to do. How much can I do, AI-based versus how much can I do, rely on them doing it. Now, overnight, I don't think I'm going to turn around and say, I have 100 million more customers that are coming in, right? We are at 200 million customers already. And what we have seen is, if I look back 10, 15 years of history, I have a database of 1.2 billion customers, which is senders and receivers. There's a good chance we've seen this person before. There's a good chance that this person has come to our franchise before. So instead of me trying to second guess it, I'm trying to make sure that at least if I've seen someone, how fast can I react? How fast can I match and present the results so that the person on the desk has less work to do? In addition to that, I'm also deploying additional mechanisms to capture their identity. For example, now we have some scanning technology that can scan your passport or scan your driving license. But still, there are rules where if I'm sending less than $1,000 to, let's say, anyone in the room, they're not going to ask me anything. But as an organization, I want to know, because why did you send it? And is this something that I can help you, while you're sending this? Can I make sure that I can also preserve that money in my ecosystem? Can I offer you a service? So for us, that is very important. So that's where the fine balance of AI comes in, is how fast can I match, and how many additional data points can I throw at it that the traditional deterministic matching cannot show.
So what I hear you saying is that when you have 200 million or 1.2 billion records, the idea of writing rules to capture all the possible exceptions is essentially not feasible, not possible.
No.
And the only mechanism is to turn to the machine to take over the work. The other piece that I know that you've been doing that's really innovative is augmenting or enriching your data. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that, but also in a sense why that's particularly important if you're using a machine learning-based approach.
So there are two aspects of it. So because we have multi-channel approach, we have customers who go to retail, and then customers who work on the app or have on the website. But then there are customers who we call the ones who go back and forth. Some, they'll do a couple of transactions on retail, but then they go to the app and do the transaction, and then they'll switch back. Now, this is where it's more important to actually enrich more data, because the customer who's going back to retail might have apps. He might be sending like $500. He might not even want to give us anything in any very form. How can I capture a little bit of detail, and then I can just augment that information with, so the geolocation of the phone that he's using already has an app installed. He was in this store, and this is the same route or same corridor that he's been sending. This is the same amount. So we are using a little bit more assumed data on top of it. Again, that's not for matching purposes, but that is for, hey, maybe this person is the same. And that's where the AI engine helps us a little bit more enhance it and say, it presents that option when something gets stuck in compliance, for example, right? That's the biggest challenge. If you want to give a good experience to the customer, you don't want them to get stuck in compliance. I can be one of the best customers, but then this one time I go to a retail store and it got stuck. I don't want to lose a customer. How can I take the previous experience, his loyalty, his lifetime value, with this one unique situation that he just didn't give us enough data? Should I penalize him? Or should I say, no problem, I have everything that I need, I'll make your experience better? That's how we are enriching it. So phone number enrichment, email enrichment, or email at least, not enrichment, but making sure it's valid. So, and we are incentivizing people to do that as well. And then address enrichment, because majority of the time, the fat finger is where the agent would just type in the wrong address. Typically, if you are not scanning something, it might not be accurate, so which you're using to make sure that it's enriched. So that, again, if the next time the customer shows up, we can always say, hey, by the way, your address is incorrect. Do you want to give us a latest and greatest address? And we'll give you extra benefit for doing that.
Excellent. So I know we're out of time. Maybe if I just quickly try to bring this together into one sort of set of thoughts, which is what I hear you sharing is you have a business with a tremendous legacy of a retail on-prem business, which is a tremendous asset, wanting to digitally transform to build this digital business. You've leveraged the cloud as a mechanism of getting there faster. You've executed that 3, 4, 5 times faster than you might have done in a traditional environment. And you've put the idea of getting the data resolved and fixed as part of that process so that you're bringing both the agility that comes from the cloud and better data, bringing those two ideas together, and then leveraging machine learning to get that done quickly with data enrichment and enhancement to make the output data better than what came in.
Yep.
Is that a fair
It's absolutely
60-second summary?
And the one other thing I would say is, the majority of the reasons why any kind of adoption fails is primarily your stakeholders are not bought in. So and then you're trying to sell a service which is not proven. So one good experience that we have was we had 3 stakeholders which were needed to bring to the table to understand, should we replace an existing master data system? It's hard enough, right? And that's where we threw the same set of data at 3 different technologies and say, let the best one win. And we ended up choosing Tamr for our needs.
That's a great place to wrap. We're out of time. So thank you, everyone, for attending this great presentation. Round of applause for the presenters.
Thank you.
If you have questions, just feel free to come down with any of the questions that you have.
Sounds good.
Transition on the break.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was good.
I think. Yeah. I forgot to turn it on.
Oh, that's okay. No.
That is